Hi, this is Ed, and welcome to The Outer Dark. In a number of previous videos, we looked into ideological subversion and its effects on the population, a type of sustained, carefully measured brainwashing, of course an example of which was the modern art movement, self-admittedly being funded by the CIA as a form of mind control used as an adherence to authority. But there is a massive elephant in the room, at which there seems to be a global effort not to discuss, which many researchers say is in fact a chemical war on both men and women, and the very social fabric and relationships between them. So stay tuned as The Outer Dark brings you 5 ways we are being chemically subverted. Number 5. First, some context. Many researchers say our world is changing in a fundamental way, with people no longer able to think as clearly in times past, where there have been decades of brainwashing employed by factionary powers for their own beliefs or agendas within our populace. In a recent interview with CIA Field Commander Robert Steele here at The Outer Dark, Robert Steele said that our food and water had been subverted and that the FDA, the CDC were corrupt institutions, a link to which will be placed, of course, in the comments section. So there is no doubt that these organizations could be used as a way in order to subvert our food and water supply and other mechanisms more directly with the human biological system. And under the guise of actually subverting our social fabric, the dynamic relationship, both biological and psychological, between men and women. But if they were doing this in the human population, what would be the evidence of this? Well, number 4. Before I go into the recorded biological change, it is important to outline a hypothesis that has been projected by a number of researchers, and that is that there is agenda to destabilize this relationship between men and women. Now, this has been witnessed largely by researchers on a psychological level, noting the difference between men and women today and men and women of the past, just in their mood and their outlook and the way that they actually interact with the world. But in order to build a relationship between the biological changes and the actual idea or hypothesis that there's a hidden order or force behind these changes, we have to look at the projected actual evidence and if it links up with the actual projections that are forced upon the populace by the actual mainstream establishment or media systems, since if there's a link between the agendas, there might in fact be an actual overarching agenda which unites both of them. So what is the cross-correlation between these two subvertive measures, the psychological and the biological? Well, number 3, there is a massive anomaly in men that is happening right now, and that is in fact that there's a massive decline in sperm rate in men, a clearly measurable decline. In fact, it has declined as much as a massive third over the past 15 years or so. The counts of healthy men from the ages of 18 to 25 have in fact significantly decreased, and as much as half the level of sperm has decreased over the last half a century, and this seems to be targeted almost exclusively to Western countries. Take a look.
Tens of billions of dollars in lost revenues.
And listen up, boys. Britain's Independent is warning of a crisis in sperm counts. A worldwide study of 26,000 men found that average sperm counts fell by 1/3 between 1989 and 2005. That increases the risk of infertility. Researchers say the possible reasons range from environmental toxins to tight underwear.
Did I ever think I'd be standing here on Al Jazeera with this over my shoulder? Well, the answer's no, but there is a reason. As studies raise concerns about male fertility in the Western world. The journal Human Reproduction's published a study of 26,000 French men that found from 1989 to 2005 sperm count dropped by about 1/3.
But you might say, okay, this is serious and points to something, a severe change in males, which has happened over the last few generations. But how does this reproductive change actually change the dynamics of Western countries, apart from the actual reproductive aspects? Well, number 2, because it's not just the reproductive aspects. In fact, scientists who have largely been ignored have recorded not only the reproductive changes, that is the declining sperm rate, but also generational declines in testosterone levels in men in Western countries. This over generations, which is only a small step to cross-reference to the actual drop in sperm levels, you can see that these correlate to something in the Western environment that has changed. You might wonder how this actually relates to women and the actual complex social dynamics? Well, you have to remember that testosterone levels in men affect women, men and women being one species. In fact, we're both human. And in westernized society, in the dynamic chemical relationships between male and females, this has a direct relationship between the actual attraction levels between the two sexes and the types of social dynamics. That is, they're different than ever before, and their attraction levels are different. The way in which they feel happiness towards each other is also different. Remember, testosterone levels in men is linked to happiness and well-being. So this one effect in itself affects the relationship between the two. And remember the one key detail: if men are changing, if there's some chemical mechanism at which is changing men, then it's also changing women in some way. Since there's no kind of drug, no type of chemical you can intake which doesn't change you on a psychological or physical level at least. So women are getting the same dosage of this as men are. Now you can point to the changes in women. For example, women's breast cancer rates have increased a massive 25% just in the last few generations. Or you can point to the fact that women's happiness level today has declined again over the last few generations, significantly in fact. So there have been changes in women. But the truth is, if this really is a vast monolithic conspiracy towards one common agenda, then you could not see it within the social and political fabric, because within a corrupt social and political fabric, information regarding the agenda would be largely subverted. But that does not mean that we cannot understand the delivery system. So that since the delivery systems would be the closest to our actual biological systems, that is the food and the water and the air. Number one, while one of the largest changes to our environment is changes to, in fact, our food and water, as I said in the prior, and changes that have been known to cause degrading in actual human biological systems, such as recent studies by the world-famous Lancet journal, which classified fluoride, in fact, as a neurotoxin. But there have been other methods that we can speculate on, such as the changes to electronic smog levels, Wi-Fi, microwaves, etc., and even chemical attacks in the air, with a number of researchers pointing towards the chemical attacks from chemtrails. But although it's hard to point to a mechanism we can point to link between these actual methods, we can link between the agendas projected by the mainstream media and those that are changing us on a biological level. Thus, in summary, actually linking the two agendas and subvertive methods together. What do I mean? Well, as a number of researchers have pointed out, and I think is clearly noticeable, there seems to be a direct push towards the androgenation of the actual sexes, pushing the transgender identity. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against transgender people or anything like that, but it is known in the biological world that the extra estrogen, synthetic estrogen that's placed in the water, which indeed is being recorded, has changed the actual sex of fish. This could explain or at least be contributed to the rising numbers of people in the transgender movement. Now again, I have nothing against transgender people, but it should be pointed out, if there is a statistical difference and a correlation, then that indeed is another evidence of something changing our very species, at least in an artificial way. Since we live in a complete ecosystem, we can't expect the effects that have been suffered by the animals in our environment to not affect us as well, when indeed we are just as equally a part of that biosphere, such as the effects on fish to do with changes to their reproductive systems as well as their sex, with some fish having two sexes at the same time. So I think it's reasonable to assume that the actual influx in people that have transgender characteristics within our population is also linked to the same effects that we see within the animal world. The actual exposure to synthetic estrogen, which changes sexual preferences and the identity of the animals in that environment. With this correlation, it's reasonable to assume that there seems to be some kind of, either by design or by chaos, a multifaceted attack on the actual gender systems, the actual identities and reproductive systems of the human species. Now, it's important to realize something here. This effect of estrogen in the water supply is actually being blamed on the actual female pill or contraceptive pill. But you have to ask yourself, is that really what's causing it? Or are they actually dumping synthetic estrogen into the water supply in order to create some kind of effect that has feminized the actual male population? Because you see dropping testosterone levels as well as dropping sperm counts in westernized society. But at the end of the day, say. You guys will just have to go out and decide for yourselves what's going on. Do your own research. But I think we can come to one agreement, and that's the agreement about the measured actual scientific data that males are indeed changing, that their biology is changing. Their sperm levels are dropping, their testosterone levels are dropping, and women are generally far more unhappy with rising cancer levels in both male and females. This all points to the fact that there's some type of chemical subversion in our environment. But like I said, go out and do your own research and decide for yourselves. In the meantime, if you did like the video, guys, please do give it a thumbs up. That would help me out a lot. And let me know what you think in the comments section. Please do share any leads, any ideas for videos, any links whatsoever. I do look through all of them. And anyway, this is Ed from the Outer Dark, and thank you guys for watching. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys later.